Hello, folks. I wanted to go over how the Red Tail Fan Exit Tickets Formative Assessments program works, built out of Google Sheets and Google Apps Script. This is the info page. There's an important piece on here that we will go over as we follow along. This is the test page where the teacher would write the tests. I've got 3 sample tests in here. The teacher would write a title for the test, 10 questions in this example, 10 answers, correct answers, Unit 1, Unit 2, and so forth. This is the roster where we add our students' names and emails. When we push out the new sheets to the students, we get a collection of their name, the sheet name, and the URL here. And in this sheet, we are is where our tests show up. In this is our user input. Our user input is where we collect the answers that the students submit on their tests and evaluate how they did. That's as they're on an individual test as they take it. And then we have a page where we back up each test so we have a running summary of how students are doing. One thing I'll point out on here, you build your tests. So really one of the only things you have to do is make a copy of this, build your tests, and then using the user input, you could push out Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, and so forth. This particular cell will grow, so if I were to add a Unit 4 test in here, that would automatically show up here. It would bring in your questions and answers, and it would also, notice, change the questions that are being pushed out to the students. So let's go back and start this with Unit 1. Let's go over here and take a look then at how we do this. The first step we need to do is make a copy. So this is my working version. If you were to make a copy of this, you would click this, make a copy. It is alerting you about the app script file. Go ahead and make a copy of that. And we'll do this demo on this copy because it'll show all the pieces that have to happen. So one of the first things it says to do in my instructional sheet here is make a copy. We just did that. And then you want to go to the drive folder that you're going to use to store the student spreadsheets in. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to use this particular folder, Exit Tickets version 3 students, and I'm going to copy the URL. So highlight the URL bar, copy, come back to my sheet here, info tab, and then it says to paste that folder right here. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I want to point out that that's the folder, and my script or my formula here pulls the ID, and we use that in the script. So that's step 1. Step 2, create some tests. Well, we've already done that, so we'll skip that. We've got some tests already created. Perfect. Step 3, and I did want to point out, but I think I already did, user input lets me take the tests I built and choose them from there. So choose a test, as we point out there. Step 3, we want to add a roster of students. So that would be, we'll leave this on test 1. So let's go to the roster page. Let's add student 1, and we should be able to copy that down. And we'll just add a couple of students. And we'll add an email address that will work to actually share this. So I want to point out that when you run the script and create a sheet for each student, it's automatically shared with edit rights to this email address. So in this case, it's going to be to an address I have. So that's the step there. We create the roster. So our next step is to run the script, add bulk users. You'll notice on your sheet you have a utilities menu that's been added with AppScript, and we're going to run the add bulk users. Now, the first time you run the script when you make a copy, you have to authorize the script like you always do when you have AppScript, and these are the things that it's doing. using Google Drive and edit your spreadsheets. We say allow. You authorize it, then you do have to run that script again. So what's happening now is we're creating a test for each of those two students. And I'm switching over here to the users tab where you'll see student one and a link to their test, and student two. Let's go ahead and open those up and see what they look like. So what's been created now is a sheet for each one of these students, and that sheet is what they're going to be taking their tests on. So I've opened up student one. From here I could open up student one, and I could open up student two. And you can see they have an archive sheet and the user sheet. So let's come back here. You do this one time because once you've created the sheets, we use the same sheet over and over again as we take the test. So the new sheets will show up. Each student will have a copy of the test. So the next phase of this is to have the students take the test. I'm going to go ahead and pause this as I, in this sample, just have the students take the test. I'll go ahead and pause. So I've gone ahead and put some answers in for student one and student two. So in this sample then, let's move on. The students have taken their test. I think we're up to here. So the students take the test. When they're finished, we're going to get the student answers. So let's go ahead and do that. We can see here that we've gone over this part here, the user sheet. So the students have taken the test. Let's get the student answers. So I just click that button, and it pulls in the answers that the students submitted. So to make this simple, I had pasted the correct answers in for student one. You can see that, and then in student two, I'd put in 3 incorrect answers. And you can see this automatically pulls in the data for the student, and I'm getting my summary of how the students have done on that test. So in real time, as the students were taking the test, I could keep clicking this button. If I click it again, of course, I'm going to get the same thing. But notice it, it automatically filled out my student one, my student two. Now I have the data that I wanted, and I'm ready to archive this test. I think that's the next piece here. We get the student answers. Let's move on to the next step then. You want to archive this test over to your summary tab, and that's going to make a copy. So that's step 5. Let's go ahead and do that. We are going to come to the summary tab, and we're going to back up the last test. So I just click the button, and what it does is it pulls in the data that's here. It pulls it in, and then the second flash you saw was that it's formatting it. So now I actually have a backup of the last test. I could show you if I do that again, it's going to pull in that same data, but I've got a backup, so I'm done. I can go ahead and undo that. That's the formatting, and undo that. The next step then is I've got the data backed up. So now what we want to do is choose a new test and push out a new test to the students. So let's follow that step. Come to the user input tab, and we push out test number 2. Now notice in test number 2, all of their answers are incorrect. So let's go ahead and we'll fix that in a moment. We're going to push out answers now, or push out this new set of questions, and we do that under the utility menu. We have a update questions function. So we've already changed the unit to unit 2. Shows all my answers being wrong because, of course, those are the wrong answers for that. But let's go to this student 1 and let's watch what happens. Let me first run the script, utilities, update questions, and then I'll come over to student 1. And you can see it happened that quickly. First of all, it archived the students' answers to unit 1. It archived those. It pushed out the new test, and it erased their old answers. But the student does have an archive of their first test. We should see the same thing on student 2. He has his archive, and you can see his answers there. And the student has a new test. And if we come back here, we'll see that another part of the script, had erased the student answers. If I get student answers here, it's going to run and then quit because there's no answers in here yet. And just to show you that, if I come in here and let's say this student happens to know that it is Delaware as the first state, and I come in here and pull in the answers, we should see student 1, Delaware, and gets it correct, gets 10%. So I think let's double check here. So we run the updates, and as I pointed out in the slide deck, this will run the student archive, clear the student answers, and clear the summary. So now you just rinse and repeat. You push out this test you just did, have the students take the test. Be sure to follow the steps then of once you've got all the answers in, go ahead and back up your last test. And I'll go ahead, if I do that here, you'll see I've got the new test and I've only got the one student, but I now have a record. So I have a record, the student has a record, and so forth. That's it. I think the last slide here says go ahead, rinse and repeat. And if you enjoy this, go ahead and send us some comments at redtailfan.org.